Oh, no, no, no. You were the most admirable woman, mentally, I've ever known.
Mentally?
You see, physical beauty is essential to me. Tragically, I once had to reject a delightful woman because I did not quite like the shape of her head. Heads are crucial to the stimulation of sustained desire.
What was wrong with her head?
It was not smoothly feminine. I'm extremely sensitive to these things. The nose should be petite, the mouth a mere Cupid's bow. Miss Evans, I could not possibly consider an attachment to any woman not in possession of these essential qualities.
Hideous hag. Sad, wizened witch. Jellyfish.
Marianne plummeted into depression. To make matters worse, Spencer then published articles on female ugliness. Big noses, big chins, big foreheads. All depressingly familiar to Marian. But even this crushing rejection didn't cool her passion. Marian's attachment to Spencer was fierce. In despair, she wrote to him. Until very recently, these letters were kept under lock and key in the British Library. Before his death, Spencer instructed that 2 of Marianne's letters should be sealed until 1985. Their contents shed some light on the relationship and revealed to what desperate measures Marianne would go to hold on to the man she thought she loved.
If you became attached to someone else, then I must die. I do not ask you to sacrifice anything. I would be very good and cheerful and never annoy you. You will find that I am satisfied with very little.
Other desperate pleas followed, and Spencer escaped to Europe. But at least he had the grace to protect her reputation by concealing these terribly sad letters. When Marianne finally met her soulmate, nothing would stop her from holding on to him. The scandal that would cast her as a fallen woman and homewrecker was about to explode.
He may call himself a Christian, but Disraeli still can't be trusted on anything Jewish. He cannot conceal his true origins.
Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions, fed with the same food, hurt with the same weapons, subject to the same diseases? One of my greatest intellectual mentors and friends was a Mr. Cohen. It pained me to see he and his family in pinching poverty because of social persecution. I would advise you to uproot your prejudices, but I fear, sir, there would be nothing of you left.
If Herbert Spencer was one of the cleverest men in London, then George Henry Lewis was one of the plainest. But it would take more than oily skin and an oversized head to put Marianne off. With a wife thrown in for good measure, this was the one man she was sure to find irresistible.
Of course, Mr. Lewis is one person that poor Marianne Evans can claim to be more attractive than.
Immensely ugly, like an ape.
So small for that ridiculous head.
I hear he tells lewd jokes in a most sensual manner.
But not only was Lewis married, he was still involved in one of the longest-running sex scandals in literary London. Only 4 of the Lewis children were actually fathered by him. The others were fathered by one of his best friends. Amazingly, he always publicly accepted and supported all of the children as his own.
Children, there is nothing to be frightened of. We must be ebullient. Her Majesty's bloomers are larger than schooners, beautifully bright they glow in the night to those bountiful bouncing bloomers. Smile.
Marianne's friends were appalled by her attraction to this little man with his risque comments and vulgar stories.
He wrote on a vast range of subjects: literature,
science, the theatre, philosophy, and of course there were the novels and the plays. He also acted himself. He was a linguist and a pioneer in the subject of psychology and the natural sciences. He possessed quite the most learned and able mind of anybody that I have known. He was bold enough to be a Renaissance man and to love me.
After a brief and intense affair, Marian and Lewis decided to run away together. This momentous decision would brand her for the rest of her life as a fallen woman. She was risking everything for love.
Dear friends, I have only time to say goodbye, and God bless you. Weimar and afterwards Berlin. I do none of this lightly. Love, Marian.
She was committing a huge crime against every moral code in Victorian society. He was married, and they would be living in sin. This must have taken incredible courage and conviction.
Light, easily broken ties I neither desired nor could live with. Women who are satisfied with such ties do not act as I did. I was perfectly prepared to accept the consequences of my actions and to accept them without irritation or bitterness.
Well, it is bad enough that she is openly... Oh, how can I put this? Living with a man outside marriage, but to take him away from his wife and children. Unforgivable.
She will be an outcast.
A fallen woman is like a rudderless ship in the night. It will all go badly for her as it should, as Providence would have it.
In The Mill on the Floss, Maggie Tulliver elopes with her cousin's fiancé. In this fictional adventure, Marianne plays out the moral dilemmas of elopement and infidelity.
I'm not going. We must part here.
Maggie?
I've been weak, selfish and hard. I failed Lucy and Philip.
The blow has been struck against them both. If you go back now, you'll achieve nothing. Except strike another blow against me. You cannot do that. Not now.
I've never embraced this. I've let myself drift. Stephen, this has not been my true will.
On her return to London, Marian would find the gulf between herself and respectable society impossible to bridge. In 1859, she came to the quiet London suburb of Wimbledon. But she was living with a man outside of marriage. Even the most liberal Victorians would find this hard to tolerate, let alone the nice middle-class families who lived here. So Marian insisted on their being known as Mr. and Mrs. Lewis. In her own mind, at least, this was a true marriage. Marian moved here to this house and lived an isolated and anxious life in these London suburbs. She expected to lose acquaintances, but not her close friends and family. She wrote to her beloved brother Isaac.
You will be surprised, I dare say, but I hope not sorry, to learn that I have changed my name and have someone to take care of me in this world.
But Isaac was disgusted that she was living in sin with a married man. He cut her out of his life completely. When Maggie Tulliver returns home after her brief elopement, her brother is also unforgiving.
I'm not as guilty as you believe me to be.
You've disgraced us. Disgraced our father's name.
I repent it bitterly. I want to make amends.
There can be no amends.
here. I've come home.
There is no home for you here. Your behavior, your deception, disgusts me. The very sight of you is hateful.
Marian treasured her life with Lewis, but she paid a high price. She was totally isolated and despised.
I've not been to town more than twice since last spring. Once to call on Mr. Chapman, and once to call on the mollusks in the zoological gardens.
Polly, my dear.
Mr. Lewis, who affectionately now calls me Polly, goes to town once a week, and he does any errands for me.
Polly, my dear. Bread, butter, ink, potatoes, the new translation of the Divine Comedy, soap, John Donne's Sermons from St. Paul's, and a mousetrap.
Yes, a mousetrap.
Lewis encouraged Marian to start writing stories based on her early life. With him by her side, she could now unleash her creative powers.
Depend upon it, you would gain unspeakably if you would learn with me to see some of the poetry and the pathos, the tragedy and the comedy, lying in the experience of a human soul that looks out through dull, grey eyes, and that speaks in a voice of quite ordinary tones.
One day, George went into town on purpose to leave me a quiet evening for writing. And I read to George when he came home, and we both cried over it. And then he came to me, and he kissed me, and he said, "I think your pathos is better than your fun."
Virgil Homer. John Milton.
At last, Marian had
William
started
Shakespeare.
writing fiction in
Edward.
earnest, but she was worried that her
Ebenezer.
reputation might sour her literary success.
Dickens or Spaniel.
George.
She decided to publish under a pen name.
I like your name.
The author George Eliot was born. Lewis sent off Marian's manuscript to his publisher, saying that George Eliot was a shy Warwickshire clergyman who wanted to remain anonymous.
George had always protected me from criticism. Always. He knew that it pained me, sometimes into a morbid fear of ever writing again. The name George Eliot became my mask, behind which I could hide my errors and my vanities.
But little did he or Marian know what trouble this would eventually cause them. In 1858, at the age of 38, Marian's first novel was published. Scenes of Clerical Life was a huge success. George Eliot's work was a revelation to her Victorian readers. Her characters were not heroic. Her stories were not melodramatic. She wrote, often in rural dialects, about ordinary lives and real human dilemmas. She based her first novel, Scenes of Clerical Life, on her childhood memories of growing up in a small Warwickshire community. In her fictional village, Shepperton, the local gossip revolves around the scandalous antics of the minister, Amos Barton. Barton gets entangled with a mysterious countess who moves into the parish.
Talking of scandal, returned Mr. Fellows, have you heard the last story about Barton? Nisbet was telling me the other day that he dines alone with the Countess at 6, while Mrs. Barton is in the kitchen acting as cook.
I wish dining alone together may be the worst of that sad business, said the Reverend Archibald Duke.
Gentlemen, may I introduce the great chronicler of our glorious countryside, the novelist George Eliot. Good day.
Everybody knew that George Eliot was a pen name, but nobody had met the actual writer. Enter a certain Joseph Liggins, claiming that he was the real George Eliot.
Disgrace that poor Liggins should...
Why anybody believed that this down-and-out from Nuneaton was a literary genius is anybody's guess, but his claim quickly gained support. Perhaps it was all just a ruse to gain money.
Our poor man is a victim of those great and greedy publishing houses. Isn't that so, Mr. Liggins?
Liggins was quick to claim credit for Marian's second novel. The hero, Adam Bede, falls in love with Hetty Sorrel, who later has a child out of wedlock and is sentenced to hang for the murder of her baby.
But at the words, "and then to be hanged by the neck till you be dead," a piercing shriek rang through the hall. It was Hetty's shriek. Adam started to...
Adam Bede was an immediate bestseller. The Times published a letter stating that Liggins was indeed its author.
It was deeply shocking. Might I ask if the act of publishing a book deprive a person of all claim to the usual courtesies? If not, the attempt to publish rumours seems to me quite indefensible. Still more so to state those rumours as ascertained truths.
Gentlemen, please. It's more than I can...
Liggins wasn't giving up. He'd now even started calling himself George Eliot, and a manuscript of Adam Bede, in his handwriting, was being circulated. This was his downfall. Marian's publishers could prove that Liggins' handwriting was different from earlier letters they'd received from George Eliot. He was finally exposed as a fraud. But if Liggins wasn't George Eliot, who was? Some people had already begun to suspect the truth.
Surely it is the Evans woman.
The books are not so uniformly dreary as that poor creature.
Quite. That dry stick hasn't the talent to write a note to her seamstress.
Another article was published, this time in the influential Athenaeum magazine, hinting that Marian Evans might be George Eliot.
It is time to end this pother about the authorship of Adam Bede. The author is a clever woman with an observant eye and an unschooled moral nature. Her work has no great quality of any kind.
No great quality. Unschooled moral nature.
Marian was furious at the implication that her relationship with Lewis was immoral. Finally, she went public.
I knew it.
No, I knew it.
What do you mean? I knew it all the time. That Marian Evans had to be George Eliot. And I told you all.
By the time The Mill on the Floss was published in 1860, Marian's life was transformed by wealth and success. It was extraordinary how her critics were able to forget her morals now that she was famous. Once isolated by even her closest friends, she was now receiving a constant stream of visitors, fan letters and gifts.
Oh, wilt thou leave me so unsatisfied?
Marian and Lewis found a deepening love for one another. They charmed, supported, and entertained each other.
What satisfaction canst thou have tonight?
The exchange of thy love's faithful vow for mine?
I gave thee mine before thou didst